produce individuals. We need to go through a sexual process of reproduction, and that's where cloning and higher animals is much more complicated, but today it is feasible. Next one. Because the main understanding, and which is a lot of research is going on, we want to talk of stem cells, we want to talk of how to reprogram a cell so that it can give rise to complete individual. Initial success, of course, was in 1950s, which very often we forget that even in 1950s, frogs were cloned, hundreds and thousands of them. But when Dolly happened in 1990s, that was a great experience because that was a mammal. People would not care about the lowly frog, but then when a mammal was cloned, yes, it was a great excitement, and that opened up lots of new possibilities. Next one. And this, of course, was there, but then the success rate was at that time 1 out of more than 300 tries, and it grew, it gave birth to a lamb, which provided that yes, cloning is feasible, is successful, but it died prematurely, an accident, or there was something else which was wrong and which we still do not understand. Next one. And of course, now there have been a variety of mammals have been cloned, since it has improved considerably, even human. Science fiction talked in 1970 that you can clone, but now it has become a realistic possibility. But the question remains, are things completely no? We still do not know. Okay, we can move to the next. It provides us lots of possibilities, but where do we really stand? Possibilities are one part, what is achievable, what can be done is another part. Next one, teaching part. Because this is something very unique to India, that we have bachelor teaching programs. Most countries, most advanced countries do not have bachelor teaching programs. India started these in 1980s in the hope that they then newly discovered power of genetic engineering and other methods that were being developed that will create manpower which can really take advantage. But somewhere we went wrong. Because what we thought was that if we just know the techniques, we can become technologists. Unfortunately, that's not true. We need to know the biology first before becoming biotechnologists. And people thought BT boom, biotechnology boom will also happen the same way. And therefore, every college, every school, every university has started with biotechnology programs. And now, of course, we have biotechnology, bioinformatics, nanotechnology, bio-nanotechnology, applied biotechnology. You think of all the possible names and their degree courses in that. Are they useful? A majority of them really do not teach anything. Next one. I'm sorry if it hurts, but I'm just trying to put it my own assessment after looking at variety of centers, variety of students from various places, where things are. They do not provide any basic understanding of living systems and self-function. Little of basic biology, other subjects, they hardly study evolution, they hardly study development, they hardly study biochemistry, they study little of cell biology, they study little of genetics. Very often what happens is, if they've isolated DNA, run a gel, teachers and students think they have done biotechnology. Unfortunately, neither of them has happened. They have not known what this DNA is, what this gel means, and so on. PCR machines are found in every place because sellers are ready to make it, and because money is available, and to have PCR machine for a student to say, I've done PCR, we think the student is great. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And partly, see, I give a simple example. You ask any student of MSc, how do you make 10% NaCl solution? 90% free. Those who pass this first question, you ask them how to make 1 molar NaCl, maybe another 10% will learn something. Why this? When they have learned all this, because they have not learned it. And this is where the major problem has come in, that we have opened shops for making money for ourselves without realizing what we are doing to the whole sort of generation of young students who hope that they will learn many things, and many others also think that perhaps we are not yet ready. In some phases, yes. In certain areas we can do, and we have developed something, and we should go ahead with them. But not everything everywhere. Especially those areas that require or that manipulate genes. There is our weakest point. And unfortunately, manipulating genes remains the central point in most of the biotechnology. And that's where the problem comes in. Next one. Structure, we know what chromosomes are made up of. Even this, unfortunately, we all know that the DNA makes a chromosome. But the architecture of this chromosome, the chemistry of this chromosome, the physics of this chromosome, very little is understood. Even how this long thread, in a single cell we have DNA as a height of almost my height or a little longer. The actual physics of this process, the actual chemistry of this process, the calculations of energy requirement, we have very little understanding. And then we have this genome, which is diagrammatically, when I quote from our book, it's a beautiful cartoon to illustrate the immense magnitude of flux in the genome. That if you take this for adenine cytosine, which is like TCGA, 46 chromosomes will require 50-meter high stack of books, standard thesis A4 size paper. Now we have read this, we have recorded this, but then where are we? We think we know the human genome, and therefore we can manipulate, we can immediately predict that we can have personalized medicine, we can have... And this has been, unfortunately, ignored completely, and junk DNA or selfish DNA. And I think this has been one of the biggest mistakes that modern biology did, of ignoring, because Crick called it junk DNA, and when Crick says something, everybody else follows. And we talk of central dogma. I'm sorry that in science we talk about dogma, but central dogma of molecular biology is that every biologist today talks about, every student learns it, but dogmas are wrong in science, are bad in science. And that's where we are in a situation where 98% of DNA, we have hardly any information. We hardly know what it does. If it does something, how it does. Yes, we can do that, and so on. That's where the problem comes. I mean, I particularly talk about this because one gene that I work, non-coding short RNA, omega gene as it is called, I've been working on for nearly 40 years. And at one time, of course, everybody was ridiculing, why do you work on a junk sequence? But as we work more and more on this, we realize how important, how critical function this non-coding RNA does. See, in this cell, everything is a network. Okay? Because none of these sentences, words are working in isolation. It will be just like this, that you take a story, take out one sentence, take out one word, and say its meaning. It can be completed, very often we say, as quoted out of context. Now, when we speak and we say, I've quoted out of what makes this create different processes, physiological processes, keep on to make us what we are. And then we talk of this, there has been tremendous progress in human genetics and clinical genetics in diagnosing a large number of diseases. Yes, there's no question about this. But a problem is, even a simple disease which till now we thought is a single gene defect. Albinism, for example, we knew it's a protein that makes nowadays, and that's where I use the word hype. That yes, theoretically it's possible, in some cases that it's actually feasible, but enormous number of questions we still need to think about. And therefore, biology becomes very important, because any technology requires basic understanding of the involved, and biotechnology can be applicable only when you understand biological processes. Without that, just using some biology and issue departments of botany, zoology, microbiology have also fallen prey to the attractive word of biotechnology or molecular biology and molecular genetics, and do not, today talking anatomy, talking morphology, talking classification is a bad word. Sorry, no, it shouldn't be. Unless we know that, unless we learn that, they take on their basic norms. I'm not saying it will not, or it cannot, it must. But we must keep on learning the basic things in a proper way. Allured by the high hopes and hype, most countries are investing enormous resources, both private and public, in the biotechnology industry. Enormous money has been put in, just as Professor Ghosh showed in the slide, how much money has gone in. Not all without use. It is useful, yes. But partly what has happened is because of this enormous massive investment, the inertia of massive investment, consumer invested interest, do not let's admit that the sequencing and questions approach based on severely limited understanding of biology that are being practiced in the name of biology may perhaps like an old experiment. That's where we really need to be cautious, and that's why I thought, but we must be cautious how much it can do and how better it can do if you understand the basics. So what can be done? What kind of things we can do? What kind of things we should be doing? Let's say, I would suggest some basic studies on genomes are absolutely needed, that we can diagnose a large number of genetic defects in our population. Unfortunately, in 90% or more cases, what diagnosis we are doing is based on Western population data. We have hardly any data on genetic factors that are responsible for disease in our population. Numerous diseases, for example, thalassemia is a very common disease on this side. We have absolutely no data, Western data, even on cancer diagnosis, whether it's breast cancer, whether it's, we look at P53, the polymorphic base sequence SLPs, but we have no data on Indian population. Which are the mutations which are much more common in Indian population? I think that is an area that we must take on top priority, that we build up a real solid database on Indians. Then we can prevent the birth of that of such children. And I think that is an area which we must invest enormously and take up as a priority. Infectious diseases. I may be bitten by mosquito, I don't get malaria. Someone else is bitten by mosquito and gets malaria. Why? We do not yet know the susceptibility differences. Because this is very important in defining why this thing happens. What kind of diseases are there? What kind of variations in the pathogens? What kind of variations in to make such wonderful fiber, which we know these fibers have strength greater than steel fiber. And these are areas that I think we need to develop in our own country, in our own way. This is one kind of background which nobody talks about. Developing, taking advantages, taking cues from animal systems, from plant systems, of designing. You see, even plants we study, all of us, they claims about biotechnology. I repeat again, I'm not saying that biotechnology is no good, biotechnology is extremely important. The scientists, the society must make use of this power that we get, but with better understanding. Much more basic analytical studies are required before we can have sustainable benefits of biotechnology. In one or two cases, like you see, for example, the biofuel production, that Dr. Ghosh has said, we understand the process there, and therefore we can make use of it. But that cannot be said of every discipline as scientific foundations. And this is where, as I explained, that we do not know our genome yet. We know less than 1% of our genome, and still we say we can manipulate genetic system, we can create copies of desired genotype. Sorry, that will not be possible.
I take this opportunity of thanking for that understand very well those who are specialized in this area of biotechnology, that where biotechnology is taking us. Sometimes bored in solving the life process. That is a big question. And it will take a long time for discussing the two experts. And the lunch time is there, and I have instruction from organizers to complete it. So with these words, I thank both the speakers and the listeners, and thank you very much.
I take this opportunity on behalf of organizing committee to heartfully and with due respect of thanking Professor A.D. Vishal for chairing this session so well. Sir, thank you so much for sharing your valuable time with us. Now I request all the dignitaries and participants to proceed for the food court for lunch, followed by reassembling here again for the next technical session.
There is one announcement. First program is the second component, and equally important component is paper presentation, oral. Third component is poster session. So those who are going to present papers, they should inquire at the counter outside and go to those halls where posters are to be pasted. So take a position. I think the numbers of posters are also displayed on the board. The fourth component and most important component of the academic program is there are 4 work groups or working groups. And for these working groups, some core members have been already identified based on our information. I think Professor Vidyarthi did a good job to put them in 4 working groups. But those who are attending, they are requested to sign up for one of the 4 groups. Related to the nature of group, they are going to discuss, and they have to come up with some recommendation and action plan. And this component we would like to publish in proceeding for wider circulation. At the same time, we would like to take up these recommendation and action plan at the governmental level or DBT level. Now these 4 groups are, one is plant and animal biotechnology, biotechnology. So when they meet first time, they can decide and work as two entities. The second one is molecular biology, genetic engineering, nanobiotechnology. So they will meet and decide what are the things they are going to discuss and implement. And the fourth one is pharmaceutical and industrial biotechnology. So I would urge you that please sign up on these. Have been assigned for this. 2 rooms are on this side and 2 rooms are in the next block in the same building. So 2 rooms are on that side, 2 rooms are here. And in the program you will find that there is a time slot given to this. You can know that your interaction which begins today in afternoon continues for 3 days and maybe after 3 days also. What we will do once you have signed up, we will make copies of this sign-up sheet and make it available to all group members. One more request. I think we are running a little behind the schedule, and unless we catch on with the time, everything will get pushed. And so I really request you that let us come back 10 minutes after. It is 1:30, so let us try to be back in 40 minutes. Okay? Thank you so much.
हाँ मैं हूँ आज 3 दिन आज बिहार मैं तो पहले MSc बायोटेक्नोलॉजी बिहार में मैंने खोला
अभी नहीं कल आएंगे कल हाँ
contribution and finding contribution in the field of toxicology, particularly understanding the molecular basis of toxicity of metals, particularly pesticides and other chemicals. He is prime mover for the setting up of biotechnology park in Lucknow, was involved since its inception. He has bestowed with several honors and awards. He was previously with ITRC, Indian Toxicology Research Center in Lucknow, as a director from 1997 to 2000. Technology in India and bioplastics.
For this kind introduction, I feel those who are sitting at the back, if they come in forward, they'll be able to see the slides. Come in forward. I think in the morning you heard two very important talks, and that gave you the scenario that what is the opportunities, where the biotechnology is, what the continent should have, and also in the introductory or the inaugural session, you also heard about it. When I was asked to come over and talk, and I understood that the idea is that how to move forward and bring biotechnology to the state of Bihar. I talk something about the bioclusters, because to succeed, you need a biocluster. And that will be very apparent when we move forward. And further, I thought that just give you a little glimpse, particularly the younger people, to emphasize that what is going on in the country. You know, it is the world's fastest growing world economy. Even the other states had 11.3% growth, if you heard, and that shows that India is growing in this state. Bihar is also growing. Reasonably proactive, as we are thinking today of bringing biotechnology here. Opening of sectors for investment, and consumer market is increasing, and significant infrastructure creation is going on for the. Dr. Ghosh mentioned this. It is possible to provide novel trade which is normally not found in the species, and one is this simply example of the extended shelf life tomatoes. Like this, lycopenes can be added, and you can have to, and you might have heard with the potato increasing the protein. This has been done as a natural center for bio research, HEPR, and which is in the in the board. Similarly, having BT cotton, which has part of the market, and we are growing a lot of BT cotton, and it is in fact using the BT cotton. But when you look at the number of the hectares. So the application goes to any field: medicine, food, feed, agriculture, environment, forest area, bioprocessing, production of chemicals, production of enzymes, fermentation, biocatalysis, and similarly with the materials, a lot of them. Which was the first one they brought out, the product, the biotechnological product, the enzymes. And then subsequently, the initiatives were taken in the 1980s, when everybody knew that Indian biotechnology is there. That was 1997, when Hyderabad-based Shanta Biotechnics launched. And it made that the cost of the vaccine came down several folds when this vaccine was introduced, and in fact, next month. And it's being used now in different countries. You saw this, the growth of biotechnology has been there, and if you again, just to repeat that biopharma is the greatest, is the blue color, which is the industry. Then the bioagriculture, bioservices, bioindustrial. So there has been growth in all the sectors of the biotechnology. It's not that it's one which is growing, but yes, obviously, biopharma is the very, very important sector and showing a tremendous growth. Now, in a state like here, bioagriculture is the one which we should be thinking about and worrying about, and there's a lot of scope to do it. Everywhere you read, still, in spite of all these advances, in spite of all those things, there are lots of millions of people who are in hunger. There is a need. So biotechnology, of course, using the biotechnology, as Dr. Lakhotia pointed out, and understanding the basic principles, it is possible. It should be possible. And one, there's the Biocon, again the first enzyme company globally to receive ISO certification. The bioagriculture, second largest producer of food, offers significant opportunities for food products. And the India's largest producer of the measles and DTP vaccine, exposed to 130 countries. So companies where the Food and Drug Administration approved companies which are set up, the laboratories are there in the country. Next. But these are the ones which people are familiar with these names. Next one. And it's a preferred innovation hub. Why? That we have 300 multinational companies, patent filed from India as of rise, the largest pool, second largest pool of science and engineering manpower in the world. Already I mentioned about the 100 US approved the pharma plants. The recognition for IT and biotech is now worldwide. People know that India is doing good in the information technology, biotechnology, and 35% of the startup in Silicon Valley, people who are having Indian base are setting up their companies over there. Familiar with Biorad, like Lilly, Millipore, and like this Syngenta, this in the area of the clinical trials is also one in India offers today. So for the setting up, when we are thinking of setting up some biotechnology park or an incubator in Bihar or maybe anywhere else, you need to consider that what you have. And build around that your idea and grow it. Because it still requires innovation. And for innovation, you require people who have made contributions in the field. University and colleges, where the infrastructure can be shared, the funding and commercialization. You have to have funding, you have the ability, you have to have people who can help you to commercialize your product. And ideas can be germinated and transferred to the companies, and the collaborations can take place. Next one. You can have equity in the companies, they can have equity if you're thinking of putting up a park. And next, the hospitals and healthcare centers are also important because these are the ones which will be providing the diagnostic services. So if the company are building the diagnostic, they're checking of them, verifying them, proving that they're doing, you need some hospital services, then the clinical trials and other facilities will come through the hospitals and the healthcare. So here will be with the help of society. So you really need a coherent network of the university, approximately associated institutions in a particular field and for the life sciences. Next. And supplies, interaction, facilitate formal and informal knowledge transfer, encourage formation and efficiency of collaboration between institutions and with the monetary culture, that is about the commercial awareness and entrepreneurship in the university, research institutes, role models and recognition of entrepreneurs, second generation entrepreneurs, that is again an important factor, growing company base, striving spin out and the startup. If the infrastructure can be created, the costs is still kept low. These are the new destinations where the new hubs of biotechnology can be developed. So the incubator available close to research organization, premises with wet labs and flexible, not necessarily when you're considering supportive policies. Department of Biotechnology, Government of India has come out with excellent biotechnology strategy and a number of opportunities which are being given, like the project on CUSB. Any university, institution, even the industry, if they have patented some idea and they want to try it out, the funds are available. Similarly, if you have, so the pieces of the incubator, again, just to repeat, but all these put together, They can have an ideal business incubator. So next one. So why entrepreneurs, idea and technologies, let's say in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, Australia, Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. They have been very successful the clusters which have come up. Next one. Where we can take examples which are very close to us in Beijing, China, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Kansi, Hokkaido, Taipei, Henshu, and Singapore, Tengsel, Malaysia, and then Singapore. Those who may be visiting just for the sightseeing, they should try to see Biopolis, a huge area, and nothing, only biotechnology being done, bioinformatics being done in an excellent fashion. The government has encouraged bringing in the top brains from whether it is from NIH or universities. They work there, they take projects there, they help the local people to grow, and several of them are from India. Who help the top positions. Hyderabad, Mumbai, Pune, New Delhi, Lucknow, Chennai, and one of the agencies has listed these three clusters in the International US-based agency. Next one. So look at here in the presence, and we have in New Delhi a number of research institutions. Here the companies are Dabur, Genomed, Panacia, Biotech. In Gujarat, we have a number of them. In Pune, Hyderabad, Bangalore. Look at it. People say Bangalore is the hub, and rightly so. Is the number of the institute, top class in Bangalore, MCDS, the NCR, and then the number that already the Vellore Hospital was there, and this area which is growing. You have to have the knowledge to use this pencil. You should know all its pros and cons. So that is why the government of India is spending so much money and in these investing, so that you have a proper facilities first to do the research, and to develop those cell lines, diagnostic manufacturers of India, contract research organization, Society for Clinical Research, Indian Crop Biotechnology Association. India has been given the land by the government, and the government is partnering in the Indian Institute of Chemical Biology, the CSR lab. It was earlier, it started a few years ago, now it is full, and they are further expanding it. In fact, they are having a very good business. A lot of companies have come up in the TISL. And this is not a part, it's totally incubator center. They provide the lease the lab space is now under the revision. Next one. So the states have been able to invest investments by having the Gujarat, which is from 18 acres near Visakhapatnam, ICIC Knowledge Park, focus on facilitating business, driven R&D, 200 acres, which is again near Hyderabad, horticulture, Institute of Sugarcane Research. Then the three institutions, Lucknow University, King George's Medical University, ICTI, and then the Council of Science and Technology. So this one, which encouraged next one. So this is gives you the, as I already mentioned, these are sponsors, these are our collaborators, which is the CSIR, Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, universities and industries. All with the entrepreneurs who are there, these can be further incubated and perfected, and then setting up the industries for the large scale production. Next one. They can consult them. We provide them developed plots, laboratory modules, common effluent treatment plant, the Indian state government biotech policies, availability of the special grant schemes, providing information about requirements of the registration and obtaining IPR, the patenting, in the pathogens which are present in water. They started with that. Subsequently, they have extended it. Now they are in collaboration with the medical college in the people who are getting the tuberculosis. In fact, they have succeeded in, company has already graduated out of the park. In a park, they have now a very small lab, but they have their own 28 acres in a place like Kundan, where they are now working. Where they have taken a space in Biotech Park and 3 rooms, and they are setting up their laboratories, which will be working and using the facilities which are present in the Biotech Park. and what their direction of India. To provide the IT services, we shared the space with them, we brought them in the park, so that, so he said, all right. So he took them, and he has really influenced the local people. And those who had a small holding of the land, they said, where our banana will go. He said, the truck which will come for my banana will take your banana also on the same price. So now the truck loads the banana goes from Fatehpur area, and he is known as Verma Ji Kelewale, and is high World Health Organization compliant production facilities, and he's going to produce fungi soap, which is already making the aspect. Thank you very much.
How these kinds of technology parks can be developed, and how the synergy of different groups, different specializations can help develop this thing, and with small investments, how things can be made. And I think some of this can be a good model for the state of Bihar as it moves ahead. Our next speaker is Professor D.N. Tiwari, who was in Patna till recently, and in 2007 he had joined as a professor in the newly created central.
Coming because I had been associated with this place, Bihar, in Patna University, for more than 37 years. I just Professor Umakant Sinha, whose group of students are sitting over here, and I'm feeling sandwiched between my teacher, Professor Usha Singh, and my colleagues, students, and all that. Anyway, it's always a pleasure because Monacha is here. He was a senior colleague here. Today's talk is related to my understanding microbial diversity. In fact, I have been working on microbial, something like old wine in new bottle, I should say. If we trace back the history, we'll find that the discovery by Louis Pasteur for the fermentation was that started considering that it's only the cutting and joining of DNA molecule is the biotechnology, and that should not be considered. In my opinion, if you make good use of any living organism to develop either a novel process or a novel product, will suit the definition of biotechnology, and at least in Bihar, because we have assembled here to make a roadmap for Bihar, for the development of biotechnology in Bihar. I would wish that we should concentrate more on these two parts. Morphologically alike, physiologically alike, but they are showing molecular diversity. So we'll have to assess that. Microbiology. I'm concerned with microbiology, that's why I'm talking only about microbes. So the first, the one gene, one enzyme, which was subsequently modified to one cistron, one function. And then the mechanism of replication, transcription, translation, and the three major discoveries, the transformation, conjugation, and translogy, and you cannot deny this fact. Next slide, please. Well, coming back to Bihar, and you can see almost every major crop is grown in Bihar. The cash crop is, of course, next slide. Bihar, with its bountiful natural resources, a fertile soil, abundant water, and varied climate, rich problems of soil, sterility in some area also. Now, how to see information communication technologies have radically changed the conceptual framework of managing the agricultural industrial production systems. Another, if you look at the metabolic pathway, at the metabolic machinery working inside, you'll see it has a multi-facet industry inside a cell. Now we have to look for that. What pathway can be properly utilized for which purpose? The microbial biotechnology is an emerging field of biology with varied application in agriculture industry. It depends mainly on the understanding. So we have a few national facilities like MGCC, MTech Chandigarh. Can one facility be sufficient for such work? And the answer is no. We'll have to develop a state-level documentation center, state-level to genetically engineered plants. All these aspects have some component of microorganism. So unless you have a clear-cut concept how to isolate, how to characterize, how to identify rain-fed areas, the wetland and the virgin ecosystem. Also, some interesting result that we have got. There are a number of wetlands. Of course, they are sinking in Bihar, but they need to be explored for microdiversity. The role or microdiversity of ethnic fermented food. Of course, we have a very little number of tribal population in Bihar now. Most of them have gone to Jharkhand. But the tribals were using fermented food since age. No one knows which fermented food contains which of the microorganism and what role do they play. Can we commercialize the process? Can we? A passing group was working on that area, and a student must be present here. She has done a lot of work. She was one of my co-workers industry. And in what way, ultimately, we have to make good use, in what way microdiversity can be further exploited in agriculture and industry. This should be the aim. Of course, the incubation period should not be less than 10 years, and our funding agency never fund for more. Dr. Diwas had pointed out 1% of the known microbes